Okay, so I'd like to begin with another quote from Rudolf Steiner from Rosicrucian, the book Rosicrucian Esotericism. To understand how the ego works on the astral body, consider that something is explained to us in such a way that we understand it. This understanding occurs because the ego has worked into the astral body, the body of consciousness. Say that, for instance, we have learned a prayer. This is the astral body being transformed by the ego. But then afterwards, every day that we say the prayer, the ego is then working on the ether body. It's a very good point. So the repetition moves the focus of the ego into the life forces rather than into the emotional life. These are really good ideas. Thanks, Gene. The underlying principle of the life body is repetition. Culmination is the underlying principle of the astral body, finishing. These ideas are the keys to understanding sleep. Why then do the sleeping human astral and ego bodies not perceive the spiritual world that they are in? This is because the astral body of the average human has no organs of cognition for the spirit. Through initiation, the astral body is provided with spiritual sense organs that are capable of following the spiritual experiences that are undergone in the night. That's the eye of the heart, EYE. To do this, the inner life of humans needs to be strengthened. In the student's feelings and thoughts, there must be a conscious effort to focus attention on subjects that relate only slightly to physical reality, or we could say sensory unreality. Mental pictures that represent remembered images of sense objects are not suitable for entering into these realms. However, contemplating symbolic pictures that are linked to particular feelings and attitudes of soul are the most effective means for building the astral organs. So the actual memory of the thing is not as important as finding something in the world that arouses a certain feeling in you. Find a tree or a plant or a mineral that arouses a certain feeling, and that feeling around that image of that thing becomes a symbol that develops the eye of the heart. Contemplating symbolic pictures that are linked to particular feelings and attitudes of soul are the most effective means to building the astral organs. Abstractions are not effective in that they lack the feelings and perceptive experiences that link the inner work to the astral body. From Rosicrucian Esotericism. Read it. I don't do page and verse anymore. You know, it's like it's too many books, too many pages, too many. So let's look at what this means. What does a symbol mean? What does it mean when I take something from the world and it becomes a symbol? Because it's the symbols that we want to take into sleep. Not the direct memories of the things. The direct memories of the things are only placeholders. I have to do something with them. In other places, Rudolf Steiner gives a picture that the alchemical symbols were not meant to be looked at, they were meant to be moved. They were meant to be constructed and deconstructed. They were meant to be formed and unformed, precipitated and dissolved. So the symbolic work is based on things in the sense world, but not as we remember them in the sense world. They are more like a dream where two things come together in a dream that have no real relationship in the sense world, but in the dream they seem significant. That's the idea. This is the penetration of the dream. This is the Rosicrucian stream. That's why I say, read Rosicrucian Theosophy. It's a very easy book, and it's filled with these ideas of the core problems or the core processes in the work in anthroposophy. Rudolf Steiner worked with it and then thought, oh yeah, everybody knows this, and then went on, but not everybody knows it. So the Theosophy of the Rosicrucians is one book. Rosicrucian Esotericism is another book. World of the Senses, World of the Spirit, although I think that's out of print. Am I right, Gene? Yeah. World of the Senses, World of the Spirit. Man as a being of sense and perception. It's another one. These books are about, or there's another one, results of spiritual research. Things like that. He's describing, they're all around the 1912 time, the esoteric school, about the issue. And then Anthroposophy, the fragment that will make you very upset. Because, and I always say, get one with a real good binding because you're going to throw it against the wall a lot. But it is about this problem of how to transform a sense experience into a symbol. How to transform a sensory experience, which is I have to move it from the astral body into the life body. But the life body doesn't go into dream world. The life body stays because your physical body needs a life, that your life body is the maintenance manual for your physical body. And the hierarchies need that in order to do the refurb that you get every night when you go to sleep. So you get an upgrade. They, give you the new news at night because your life body and your physical body are not under the duress of the astral body and the ego having to deal with the sense world. That's a real biggie. That's what the purpose of the daily review, the backwards review, that's what that's about. So I have to build in my soul an organ that can receive my astral body and connect it to my life body. And that organ is the Gemut, or in other language, we could call it the sentient body. The sentient body is a link in a level of consciousness that to our day consciousness is totally subconscious, or unconscious is the best way to say that. That's what Jung called the personal unconscious. The collective unconscious is what the physical body and the life body are doing. That's archetypal things of, digestion and stuff. But the sentient body is the personal unconscious that has to make a bridge between the life body and the lower parts of the soul. And it's that area of the sentient body. This is in Theosophy, if you want a source for that. That's another one you need to get a good cover for. So that quality of the sentient body is we need to train it to get past being personal. Unfortunately, the developmental stage of the sentient body is adolescence, which makes it difficult to make it not personal. Because in adolescence, we take everything personal. So when that sentient body gets formed during adolescence, with everything's personal, we have to learn how to go down, like Christian Rosenkreuz did. We have to go down into the cellar of the castle down there, and down there we see Venus naked and it fries our eyeballs. And we have to spend the rest of the time trying to make amends for that. That's the alchemical wedding, because people don't realize, but the things Rudolf Steiner is bringing makes you the yeast of the New Jerusalem. It moves you forward culturally, and you're seeing things that people could be burned at the stake for a while back. What he brought, he paid the price for. So these ideas they're a kind of Rosicrucian stream about this issue of the world has fallen into things, and the followers of Christian Rosenkreuz, through the teachings of Rudolf Steiner, have to bring it back again into the spirit. They have to move it away from the belief that the world is just filled with stuff to the world is made of beings that are waiting for me to evolve. That's the Rosicrucian stream. So here's a diagram of a kind of dynamic that you can use as a symbol, as a meditation of what I just described to you. Here's a person looking out of their eyes, having a sense experience of an abstract entity, the letter A. When you look out at the letter A, that letter A could be many, many, many things, except that letter A that you're looking at gets restricted because it's that one right there. So your sense experience forces that letter A into an abstraction. It's a placeholder for something else. And you lose contact with the sensory experience that you're having in seeing it, because it becomes a fixed idea. Oh, A, I know what A is, like, hello. But A, as an abstraction, has multiple meanings and vectors to it. But when you see it in that particular context, and you say, I know what that means, you cut it off from its life. You restrict it from its potential to become something else. And this is the death of the cosmos into abstraction. This is what he was saying in that Rosicrucian work. Abstractions will not do this work. They have to be revivified. So my soul leaves my body and goes out to the thing and says, oh, that's what that is out there, and then comes back to me with what we call sensory experience. But in the sensory experience, my soul is not really present most of the time. This is freeway sleep. So right now you're probably digesting dinner, but you're listening to me too. But your serotonin secretions from your digestive apparatus are probably going haywire right now, trying to deal with what went in there at dinner time, but you're not aware of it. There's a whole huge realm of sensation that is under the radar that we are not in contact with. We're only in contact with the thing that the soul says, this is what you need to pay attention to. So the arrow of my attention goes out to the abstract thing, but then it comes back in, and it goes in two directions. If I form a mental image of the thing out there, usually it's just a snapshot kind of consciousness of the corpse of the thing. I don't care how that A got there, I just know what it is, let's move on. And that's the mental image here in my neurology. But my thinking is not in my neurology. My thinking uses my neurology. My neurology is just the monitor. So if you have a problem with your computer, you don't have the guy look at your monitor. He has to go into your motherboard or something, So your brain is just a mirror. That's the idea. Where images reflect up, and your digestive organs are mirrors also, where images reflect up as memories or mental images of an experience, and they just get put into orders of abstraction. Those kinds of memories do not build the organ in the heart. They don't change the sentient body. If I become aware of that letter A, say I'm a calligrapher, and I suddenly say, oh, that's serif so-and-so in this family of, blah, 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 then I am revivifying that letter A that's just an abstraction, because I go up into another realm where A has much more potential than that thing out there. My mental image becomes much more fluid, it becomes much more active, and I live in the realm of all the different potentials, but I have to build that as a capacity in myself. We call it going to school. Universal education gives you more options than just what's on the page, unless you're autistic. And if you're autistic, what's on the page you take literally, and that's pretty much what she wrote. And this is the coming consciousness, unless we do something about it. So what can we do about it? We have to take that sense experience, and instead of just cleverly arranging the corpses on the battlefield of abstraction, we have to take that into our heart. We have to find feelings and inner experiences that enrich the experience of that letter A. We could say, maybe it's a scarlet letter A. How many just had a picture? Okay, well, you're probably the literati here, so. Yeah, so when I do that, maybe I went back to being in high school or something when I said the red letter A, the scarlet letter A. And then there's all these pictures that come out of that. The more pictures I can bring, the more fluid in me that sense experience becomes. And I have to work to do that. And then, if I'm particularly interested in novels from that time, then maybe my whole life is that. Then I'm called an English major or something, and I have all these experiences that I bring towards that sense experience. I have many more options in my soul because there are feelings that I have rather than just sense memories of that thing there or mental images that I've arranged. And this is in the role of the arts and poetry and things like that. Aesthetic experience, we could say. So as I begin to do that, I take images into my heart. That's where they have to become symbols. So in order for them to actually live in my heart, if they're just abstractions of memories, the heart says, this is not working for me. The heart doesn't think in abstractions. It thinks in pictures that move. Because its whole world is movement. Its whole vocabulary is movement. Its whole concern is movement. Is this a push? Is this a pull? Is this warm? Is this cold? Is it salty? Is it not? Is it moving fast? Is it moving slow? Is there something stuck somewhere? What was added when they ate this, you know? The heart is tasting the whole universe of the movements of the blood. It's savoring them. And so that heart force needs to be fed pictures that I control as a mage, as a magician, but I move them forwards and I move them backwards in sequences. And the kicker of all this is it doesn't matter if the sequences are true or not, as long as I continue to do them as a practice, because as I just read, if you just remember it, it's in your astral body, but if you repeat it, it moves to your life body. So if you repeat the exercise of forming and dissolving the picture, your life body builds a bridge to your soul. That's your sentient body. And in that sentient body, that's the Gemut. That's this soul force of enthusiasm for my incarnation. And enthusiasm for my incarnation is the healing force that we need in the yeast. And Steiner is very clear. The esoteric school will never be the loaf. It always is the yeast. And it has to be the yeast because the soft science of today is the hard science of tomorrow. The cultural developments that the mystery schools make get first persecuted, then co-opted by the establishment, and then become dogma that the next generation of mystery school has to rebel against. That's the sequence. But it means that the inner life of the mystery pupil needs to work with symbols to bring the revivifying force, always, always, always revivifying life into the death force of the abstraction. So let's look at how to do that. So please look on your first handout we used. We'll look at figure 7.
What page?
7, and we'll go figure 7 on the page that has Christ toast in the upper left corner there. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's been a long day.
Anybody else?
Okay, so in figure 7 on the left is a symbol. It's a very famous symbol. It was on the book that the angel brought to Christian Rosenkreuz in the alchemical wedding on the first day, the invitation. And when Christian Rosenkreuz saw it, he says, I knew that the evil one could not be here, present. So he trusted that this experience was real when the invitation to the alchemical wedding was given to him by an angel. Okay, so that symbol is the great hieroglyphic monad of John Dee, who was an alchemist. And if you look at it, it is an abstraction. But if I imagine in myself that I am drawing it, it ceases to be an abstraction because my life body has to participate with the imagination. My ego is moving through my soul body down into my life body, because my inner movement in my mind is actually triggering stuff in my cerebellum. When you move your eyes around that figure, it's as if your whole body was moving that in eurythmy. We have Rudolf Steiner talks about the little man in your head. We have a couple of them, at least, in there. And this kinesthetic, oculomotor muscle from the movement of the eyes back into the primitive neural cortices, blah, 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 all that neurology, is an actual process that can be used to build symbols. I have to participate in the symbol rather than looking at it. So let's participate in this symbol. So I see a circle with a dot in the center of it. So please imagine that you are drawing that circle with the dot. Okay, that imagination, now just imagine looking at the circle with the dot. The drawing of it in your imagination reaches into your life body. The looking at it without the drawing of it reaches into your astral body. But when I actually imagine that my neurology is structured in such a way that I am actually creating new neurons. I'm refurbishing, because all the movements there at the bottom of the third ventricle, subventricular areas, are the biggest site of neurogenesis, which is, you get a chance to do it over again. Third ventricle. It's going from short-term to long-term memory. In order to go to long-term memory, I can't just remember snapshots. I have to actually participate. I have to redo them. I have to repeat them so my life body can grasp them. So my I being can reach down into my life body and help me grasp the creative movements that are in the picture. Okay, so the drawing that you just did of drawing a circle with a dot in it, that is the symbol of the sun. So in the ancient times, when the masters wanted to train the pupil, they would get a stone or a piece of wood, and they would carve that symbol in the stone or in wood, and the pupil would have to run their finger around it and move it until the movement of their body through their cerebellum and all the neurology there went up into their soul, so they could remember the movements that went to make the symbol. It would be that part of your training would just be running your finger along the glyphs. That's called a glyph. It's called working a glyph. And if you know glyphs and you know your eurythmy diagrams of how to move in eurythmy, Rudolf Steiner was just drawing alchemical glyphs. That those choreographic patterns of the eurythmy things are alchemical glyphs. The little circle with the movement, that's the sun. That's Leo, or whatever. There are these pictures of certain kinds of movements that have archetypal meaning. So we just did the sun. Now look at what's up on top there. That's kind of a half a circle. Imagine you're drawing that, the half of the circle. You go to one side and then the other side. You're drawing the circle, or you're drawing the half circle. Now imagine you're just looking at the half circle. Now start to draw it again. Take you're playing air guitar with your finger, you're drawing half a circle. So the difference between imagining drawing it or tracing it and just looking at it as a memory is the difference between just forming an abstraction or creating a symbol. When I create a symbol, my life body becomes involved, and when my life body meets my soul, the space in between, and it meets my sentient soul, the space in between is filled with feelings, because that's all adolescence is about. I'm actually going back into my sentient soul and trying to pull up these obscure feelings of who am I and why am I here? Why do I'm sure I was a foundling because I would never pick my parents, you know? Like, why me? You know, what did I do? So I have to go back into that sentient body, and I have to visit it consciously and refurbish the movements. I have to feed my imagination lawful pictures, or else it's just filled with abstractions, and they never actually engage my soul in a way that I can retrieve them from sleep. So we just drew in that half circle a picture of the moon. I have the moon sitting on the sun. So now, imagine, draw the moon in your mind's eye, draw the moon, or even take your finger and trace the glyph. Let's trace the glyph of the moon, then go around the sun, go to moon, go around the sun, moon, sun. And now, when you get to the bottom of the sun, go down to the bottom of the vertical line, and then go up, and then go side to side, and then go up, and then down, and then around the circle. Trace the moon, the sun, and the cross. So now let's see what kind of feelings are around this. So imagine tracing just the circle of the sun. Imagine and say, is there a feeling connected to this in my organism? And now I'll go down to the cross and draw the cross. Are they the same feeling? Of course not. The one is kind of continuous and flowing and moving. The other one is, I go here, and then I gotta go over there, and then I go over here, and then go over there, and I'm like, oh, excuse me, I'm going to go over here, and then I'm kind of crossing myself. That's always a symbol of earth. Because there's this point in the center, it says, you're here and you can go over there, but when you come back, you're still going to be here. And with the sun, it's like, okay, go. Oh, you're coming back? Oh, yeah, but you're still going. Oh, but I'm coming back. No, but I'm still going. Oh, yeah, I'm coming and going. At the same time, oh, that's the sun. That's, everything is okay under my vision, and earth is, you know, you can either go this way or that way. Take your pick. Can you feel that? Those are the feelings that Rudolf Steiner is describing that I have to get in contact with when I'm looking at things. And they're there all the time, but until you actually take the time to stop and go, oh, wow, how about that? It just becomes an abstraction. But when I work with it and form it, my life body participates in that and changes it from simply being an abstraction to being a source of new forces of consciousness for me. It becomes a tool for exploring the dimensionality of these symbols. So I have my circle, I have my moon, my sun, and now we just made Mercury, the moon, and the sun, and the earth. Kind of, Mercury is Mercury in alchemical language is all of the above. Mercury is everything, everything. Earth, sun, moon. That's Mercury. But now let's do Venus. Do the circle and do the cross, but don't put the little horns on the top. Now we have Mercury without the horns. Yeah? That's a very different feeling than Mercury with the horns. So this is the sun marrying the earth. And we get Venus. Kind of feeling of very beautiful tick-tock relationships. If you look at the orbit of Venus, it's the most harmonious reciprocation between the periphery and the center of any of the planets. It's just order, order, order. If you know box air on a G string, Venus. Dum, 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 like that. You know, that's the mood of Venus. Okay, so we have Sun, Moon, Earth, Mercury, Venus. What about those on the outside? Turn it sideways. And if you have the symbol, the monad, at the top of your paper on the upper right, or the top of the paper, you can trace the leg of the little man there from the upper left down, and then across, and then you get to the vertical cross, and you make that symbol of the kind of like a 4. And that's the symbol of Jupiter. So, help your neighbor. So, you turn it so that the little man is horizontal with the sun to your right. And start in the upper left. You trace down, and then across to the cross piece, and then the cross piece becomes the limit, and you go up and down on the vertical, and that's the sign for Jupiter. Okay, so now we found Jupiter. Let's look for Saturn. Anybody find Saturn? This is Saturn like this. So I hold it vertically. I take one leg off. I take one arm. I take one leg off. I take the sun and the moon off. Saturn.
Can you do Jupiter?
Jupiter looks like this in the diagram. But gee, where is Mars now? We got everybody, we've got a party going, and Mars is. Mars is always the fly in the ointment, usually. So if I take the sun without the center point and come down on the vertical shaft, And then just take the two parts of the legs that go up like that. I have Mars. So the great monad is the sign of all of the planets in our solar system. So when the angel came to Christian Rosenkreuz and said, you're invited to this great wedding, like, here's the invitation, like, here's where we're going. Put on your seatbelt. And Christian Rosenkreuz said, I think maybe you got the wrong guy. I don't think I want to do this anymore because the invitation is scary. Yeah, and the delivery boy, the delivery angel had wings were filled with eyes, all staring at him, and gave him this and said, the bridegroom has asked for your attendance. Okay?
Was that an offer he couldn't refuse?
Yeah. It's like he says, I think I remember wanting to do this once. But maybe not now. Okay? So the great hieroglyphic monad of John Dee, if it's used, if I draw it, I'm actually meditating on the solar system. But if I just look at it and it's just this fixed thing, it becomes an abstraction. Oh, that's weird. You know, it's kind of interesting. Maybe I could put on a T-shirt or something. But it actually is a tool for transforming my soul. It's an alchemical tool. So if you work with it, and you do this kind of exercising with it, forming it and dissolving it before you go to sleep, and then you let it go, you do a review of your day, and you form and dissolve a meditative symbol like this, a picture, and then you give that over into sleep, that goes into the cosmos in a place where the will that is behind this is operative. The will that is behind the movements is operative.
Do you have to form it mentally as a picture in your head versus drawing it?
Oh, you could draw it. Yeah, you could draw it. No, but it's better if it's mental, but you could draw it. You could air guitar it too. Doesn't matter. You know, just kind of draw it in the air. But it's not like, okay, I'm going to do this, I go to bed. It's like, I have to really feel the movement, the difference between the circle and the cross. The difference between Saturn and Jupiter. I have to enter into those feelings, because even behind the sun and the earth and all of that, there are feelings behind how those sigils got to be that symbol of Mars. Mars is a little guy with an arrow, which is Mars. So these pictures carry behind them a will, a creative will, an imagination, as Rudolf Steiner said. And if I work with it, I take it into sleep, and then I have a dream or a set of dreams. And it's not like, oh, now I know what it is. It's just that I become aware in my dream that I am dreaming. It's not like suddenly they come down with the trumpets and it's like, you know, the duck comes down and says, oh, you got the secret word, you win. And no. No, so that's why I'm saying what I'm saying. Lucid dreaming is when you actually go the other way. You try to remember your body in the dream. This is your sentient body you want to keep attached to your life body, because a part of it goes off with your sentient soul and your I being. But you want to keep that in the bed. Otherwise, it gets to be a little weird. So it's almost the opposite of lucid dreaming. So if you do the practice, just give it away, what happens is you are salting in your sleep consciousness the seed of being awake. And the alchemists always, you would see this little thing, when asleep, be awake. And if in Rudolf Steiner's work, this is the transformation of dream life. Knowledge of the higher worlds.
When you're imagining this and feeling your way to it, when you're moving through the shape of the moon, should you be thinking moon? Like, do you have to identify the planets where the gestures are?
If the moon means something to you, that's good. If the sun means something to you, if you're a gardener and you live in California, the sun means one thing than if you're in Alaska and the sun means another thing. If you're a gardener in California and it's August, the sun equals death. But if you're in Alaska in May, the sun is, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Same sun. So it's the feelings that you bring. So if there's a meaning for you in there, and you can recall that, then that enhances that will force in drawing that. If you're a geometer, that would be a kind of feeling. If you're not, that makes no sense at all. So that's what I'm saying. So you bring to it who you are and the feelings you have. If you have a deep feeling for the relationship between the center and the periphery, and you've used a compass a lot, then that goes into the hopper along with your drawing. Yes, absolutely. But it's personal to you. Okay? So if you do this, you may have the experience that I had. On the right of that symbol is another form. Still figure 7, but look at the hieroglyphic monad and look to the right. You see something else. And that something else is called the Circle of Willis. The Circle of Willis, W-I-L-L-I-S. Willis was an anatomist who found that the Circle of Willis is the way in which the venous structure drains the cranial cavity, especially down the center of the third ventricle. And that loop at the top, that would be the head of Mercury or the great monad, is a circle of blood around your pituitary gland. And the little horns and stuff on the head, they go out to other parts in the front of your cranium. And then there's a great vein that goes through the center towards the back, and the back where the legs split out, that's your pineal gland. At the bottom, where they split. So you have written into your neurology the picture of the great monad. Oh, it looks like all kinds of things, and that's called imagination. So as I'm working with it, I was having a problem. I didn't understand certain aspects of the third ventricle. And as I worked with the great monad, when I was doing a translation of the Alchemical Wedding one time, and I was working with the great monad to try to say, what's happening here? I stumbled on this in Gray's Anatomy. I went, yo! And so for me, that was all I needed. Now for somebody else, they would say, well, yes, but it's not quite a circle. And they'd be correct. And there's no blame. Question, I saw a hand. No. Okay? So a skeptic could say, well, that is not that. And they'd be correct. But I can say, well, gee, it affected me as if it was that, and I'd be correct. Because in this work, it's not whether you're correct or not, it's whether you keep repeating the exercise. That's what matters, because repetition takes what is happening as an abstraction in the astral body into the life body. So I have to keep repeating the forms and drawing them again and again. And what happens is they keep building as I keep doing it and taking it into states of unknowing, which we call sleep.
It sounds like it's important that example you gave, that it doesn't remain what it is outside. And that certainly didn't happen with this.
Absolutely.
If you want it to be yours.
Yes.
It's because it's a symbol.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So when it's outside, it's part of, the public domain, and in 17 years, anybody can understand it. So, however, when I take it into myself, and I connect it to these feelings of becoming, I enrich it as an inner activity in my soul, and my life body becomes sensitive to what's coming back to me out of the unknowing world in the spirit when I receive a dream. My life body becomes sensitive to be awake in my dream state. This is in Knowledge of the Higher Worlds, Lecture 9, Transformation of Dream Life, which is the door to higher knowledge. So now we're going to take a little trip through Venus world. So please look at figure 8. So this is a picture that's part of the work in biodynamic work and the biodynamic preparations. And I'm just going to run through these images to give you a kind of feeling of how it's possible to connect up things at very different levels of reality that have a similar, what we could call a similar rubric. And on my websites, I used to post a lot of articles and stuff, and I was very fond of taking pictures of little wavelets at the American River, and then I took a picture of mountaintops in snow going over Denver, and it was the same picture. It was the same form, the waves, because the landforms there at Denver, the pressure was creating kind of a wave going in the Front Range, and the same kind of snowy top was there, and I thought it was really cool. And I used to get the nastiest letters from people. It's like, I kind of like your weather stuff, but stop putting this junk on here. This kind of pseudoscience junk, because a mountaintop in Denver has nothing to do with a wave in a river. And that's a contemporary consciousness of an abstraction. I finally stopped doing it because I had to say nasty things back, and I don't like to do that. So it's like, I'm paying for this website. If you want to do that, you have your own website. Okay, so I'm going to describe to you something in the alchemical language called Sal and Sulf. Sal and Sulf are two states of being. Sal is precipitation, and Sulf is rarefication, dissolving. Sal, precipitation, and Sulf, dissolving, rarefication. I'm going to describe the life gesture in all of these different things in terms of Sal and Sulf. Sal is point-centered, Sulf is peripherally centered. Sulf leads things, Sulf is burning and combusting and oxidizing and dissolving, going to the periphery. Sal is concentrating and coming into a form in the center. Those are the two polarities. So on the upper left in figure 8, there's a yarrow plant. The sal part of the yarrow plant would be down at the bottom where it's contracted into a very hard and dry little stem. But then it goes up and up and up and starts to break apart in the little florets. And as those florets break apart, that's a sulf gesture. It's as if the plant were under some form of combustion. Even though it's not burning, it's actually going into a space where things that could be very irritating, like pollen, are formed. Things that could escape as fragrances into a much higher volatile state are formed. Oils, essential oils in flowers. That's sulf. So the plant in its contracted form is sal, and in its rarefied form is sulf. But if you look at the yarrow, you see that the sulf is just not all over the place. It's all in one plane. So that means that my sulf quality is not just going to go and burn and go into smoke. It is contained a little bit at a particular plane. That's called the flowering plane. And if you go up in the mountains where the yarrow grows and it's blooming, you could take a laser that they use for doing surveying and run it across the top of those yarrow plants, and they are all within an inch over the whole meadow of that height above the soil. So there's something there that those plants go to that spot, and then they form, in the sulf state, they form a kind of sal boundary. They regulate rampant sulf. They give it a plane and say, okay, you're going to sulf, but we'll stop you here. Okay, that's the way a phenomenologist would read the gesture of the yarrow. So now let's look at the antler. So we see there's a sal part where it comes out of the deer's head, and that goes up and up. But look at how the tines are operating on each shaft that goes up. They go up, and then they reach their sulf, but they all stop at the same place in each branch. Of course, the ones down below are lower, but if you look at the angle of the ones down below, they all have a plane that they grow to. So we see a similar gesture of sal and sulf, and in the life of this animal, the sal is the bone that is being carried up with the blood of the velvet of the antler. In the forming of an antler, the deer's blood surges out of its head and carries behind it a wake of bone. Blood is sulf. It's volatile. Bone is sal, a deposit. So the antler has a sal-sulf polarity with very strict region where it organizes itself. So the antler could be considered to be an image of the yarrow. They have a similar life gesture. Everybody okay? So Rudolf Steiner then says, take from the bladder of a deer yarrow blossoms and put them together. And people say, well, I wonder what he had for lunch that day. Okay? Because it's like, well, what's the logic of it? The logic, look at the kidney. That's a diagram of a kidney. You have a sal part in the main duct that goes into the kidney. Look at the branching pattern and look at the branching pattern of the antler. All those little branches go up and they stop. You could draw a circle around the top and they all have a plane that they stop at. Look at the form of the kidney and look at the form of the inflorescence of the yarrow. Okay? What I'm doing with you now is called reading life gesture. And in reading life gesture, you find symbols in the natural world that have harmonic relationships to each other in their form. And they can be used as meditations to find synergy. So Rudolf Steiner said, if you take the bladder, and the bladder is part of the urogenital tract coming from the kidneys deposit in the bladder this action of extracting from the bladder the urine. And in the urine is the nitrogen of urea. In the ancient language, that nitrogen in the alchemical language was called azoth. Azoth was the substance in the air that carried the common consciousness of the people. Because most of what you breathe is nitrogen. And it's considered today to be inert. But in the ancient times, pranayama was so that you could conserve nitrogen in order to expand your consciousness to the collective. That's breathing. And when you do that, the nitrogen changes in your blood and your kidney becomes sentient, because Rudolf Steiner connects your kidney and the excretion of nitrogen. He says there's a light that comes up out of your ether body when you excrete urea into your bladder that rises up into your head through your heart, that is the source of your ability to form inner pictures. He calls it kidney radiation. So the whole process of extracting akasha, urine, urea, nitrogen, wisdom, from the air is continued by the kidney and takes what could be extremely volatile up to a certain spot and then stops it before it becomes rampant in you and pumps it overboard. And you call it going to urinating. Because if you had that extra nitrogen in there, you would start to have very strange pictures at night, especially in your dream. Or you could have so much nitrogen in your blood that it would start to fall out of your blood into your feet, and then you'd have other kind of pictures called gout. So this process of the air being very volatile and then having to form a boundary to stop it from rampant astrality, those are pictures that are behind the biodynamic preparation, the bladder prep for Yarrow. And then he goes further. He says, well, where do we get these images? So let's look down there. It says kidney cell. That's called a glomerulus in the kidney. It's a cell in the kidney. And inside the cell are these tubules where the urine comes in and gets pumped around, and then the nitrogen gets siphoned out, and then the rest of the water gets put back in the system so you don't go crazy and lose all your electrolytes and your fluid balance. So the kidneys are continually extracting this through a kind of exchanger, like a heat exchanger or water exchanger. And that's what you see in the kidney cell. But on the right is a picture of the orbit of Venus. And what I've done is I've just filled in the patterns of the orbits, and unfortunately it printed out a little darker than it should have. And those orbits of Venus go out beyond the sun, that's the dotted line, and within the sun, but the orbit of Venus are surgically placed along the sun's orbit to limit. It forms like this halo of limitation between the inner parts of the sun and the outer cosmos. Venus is the regulator in its orbit and its looping that regulates the outer planets and the inner planets. If you were to track the movements of Venus from day to day to day, how many degrees a day it's moving or how many minutes it's moving? For months, it's moving at the same degree, 73, 73, 73, 73, 73. And Mars is all over the place. Mercury's starting and stopping. Saturn's off having a picnic somewhere. And Venus is like, it's like a little sun. So Venus and the sun have this kind of inner, outer, periphery, center kind of breathing to hold the outer planets and the inner planets in a kind of embrace of order. Is the function of Venus. So that Venus is connected to the kidney. It's the regulator of what's out and what's in. That's what your kidney does. This is out, this is in. So are these imaginations, quote, true? It's an interesting question. So to someone that says the orbit of Venus has absolutely nothing to do with the kidney, that's just old wives' tales, that could be true from a certain perspective, from an abstract perspective. But from the perspective of needing to form symbols and find synergistic relationships that are healing, the imaginative faculty needs to be awakened to these kinds of formal harmonics. So the Rosicrucian path is to be able to form an organ in my heart that can tolerate not knowing for a long time until these pictures gradually come and form themselves, and then I have an inner knowing that doesn't make them, quote, true, but makes them real. So there's a difference between, Rudolf Steiner says, there's a difference between being accurate and being true. There's a difference between being true and being real. So let's look now. We'll go to our last figure, figure 9. This is a little meditation that I worked out a couple years ago from an alchemical idea called the gate of the sun and moon. And the gate of the sun and moon is meditation on how a past evolution and future evolution, using the mantras from the Rosicrucian work, Ex Deo Nascimur, In Christo Morimur, and Per Spiritum Sanctum Revivissimus. Those are mantras given by Rudolf Steiner in various places, but they actually have a Rosicrucian root from Christian Rosenkreuz. So if you look at the figure on the left in figure 9, the little face there is the moon, and the little orange-looking slices there, that's the Earth. So we have the equator of the Earth, and then the lines of latitude. And you see that the arrows are going in a counterclockwise direction because the moon moves counterclockwise around the Earth in its orbit. So you see the moon. Now, the moon, if I look at the moon on the right side of the Earth, that is the condition at the dark of the moon. Because the moon is in the sky. During the dark of the moon is in the same part of the sky as the sun. That's why you can't see it. It's actually in front of the sun. When it's directly in front of the sun, that's called an eclipse. So during the times of the dark moon, the sun is overshadowing the moon. It's in the sky. If you could blot out the sun, you could see the moon in the sky with the sun at the dark moon. So that side there, where you see the sun, it's a big smiley face, and the moon with a little man between it, that's the dark moon. Then on the other side, when the moon's on the left, that's the full moon, because the moon is on the other side of the earth with the background of space behind it, and the sunlight goes past the earth and illuminates the full face of the moon. We get the full moon on the left. Quarter moon is in front of and behind. So as that moon moves around the earth, there are times where meditationally you can use it as a kind of slingshot. Okay, because that moon, and the relationship between the moon and the sun is what they used to call the gate. There is a gate. And the gate is when you wish to get past all your beliefs and go into a space that's where you cease to know things the way you know them here, but you immerse yourself in what we could call radical unknowing. And meditation. And it's necessary, or it's useful, to get to radical unknowing so that you can get the maximum refurbishing for your imagination. People ask me, how do you keep all this stuff in your head? And I don't. If I did, it would probably be crazy for me. But I do a lot of refurbishing imaginatively. I do a lot of inner picturing thing and give them a sleep. And, you know, the more letters you send out, the more mail you get back in. It's just kind of the way it works. So if you're not putting stuff out, you're not getting anything back in. I mean, you get something, but it's just a maintenance charge, you know. So if you really want to start getting some packages in UPS, then you have to start ordering things on the internet. And that means you have to put pictures out. So in order to do that and to get a space where it's very quiet and sustaining, the old people, the alchemists said, you have to go through the gate of the sun and the moon. So the way you do that is you imagine that you are off of the earth watching the moon rise wherever that is rising for you. So you have to, if it's a full moon, it'll be, and you're here, you're in, let's see, what is this? This is New England. Okay, it's been a couple long weeks here. So you're in New England, and you would look out over the Atlantic, and the moon would rise, and you have to imagine that the moon is rising, and then ask yourself, where is the sun? That is big. If you can do that, you are a mensch. And so, where is the moon? Where is the sun? A great practice. A great practice. And any time, my son, one time I was talking to him about this, and I said, oh yeah, that's Aldebaran. And he reached in his pocket, at his iPhone, and he went, oh yeah, there it is. That's Aldebaran. I said, that's cool. Where's the moon, Ben? He went, oh yeah, there it is. The moon's over there. He said, isn't that great? I said, yeah, now do it without your phone. So when you do it without your phone, you are the app. It's not something that, you know, somebody that you're paying for. Or that is a menu. Yeah? So you watch for the moon to rise, and then you ask yourself, where is the sun? And then you imagine from your position that you orient your space so that you imagine yourself gliding between the space of the sun and the moon. If it's on the other side of the earth, you have a big gate. If it's on the same side as the sun, you have a narrow gate. But you still have some space there between the moon and the sun, even at the dark moon. You imagine yourself going between those two entities, and then you imagine yourself going to your right, you turn clockwise and stand behind the sun, looking at the earth and the moon. So in figure 9, all the way on the right, you have an example of what you would see at the full moon. You would see the sun, you would see the earth beyond it, and you would see the moon beyond that. If it was a dark moon, you would see the sun and the moon and the earth lined up like that. That imagination, for you to actually work with a symbol and to move that, is very, very powerful on your life body. To actually orient to how that would be. When you're standing behind the sun looking, then imagine that you lift your eyes to all of the star realms behind. Fill your soul with the majesty of that and the feelings of what that might look like. And say to yourself, out of God, we are born. God made this for us. And in Latin, that's ex Deo nascimur. We're born out of God. This great glory of the sun and the moon and the earth and the stars. And I'm getting a perspective of that from having gone through the gate of the sun and the moon. There's no way you could ever see that in the sense world. But you can see it in your imagination in a very clear way. And if you lift your eyes to the stars, your soul gets filled with the splendor of it all and the wonder of it all. And if you can imagine to feel that and say, out of God we are born, that is a very deep connection for you, for your life body. But that's the first step. And then out of that movement to go around behind the sun, if you keep going in a clockwise direction, you go around from the sun and then go past the earth again and go and stand in space where the sun and the moon go behind the earth and the sun gets blotted out by the earth. That would be an eclipse. So you're in the darkness of space on the totally opposite side, and you look, and the sun is hidden behind the earth. But you imagine that the earth, through the activity of human beings, is gradually becoming more and more spiritualized, more transparent. And as the earth becomes more transparent and the sun shines through the transparent earth, you see a rosy light coming through the earth as the earth becomes spiritualized by the compassion and good deeds of humans. And you say to yourself, in Christ we are dying. In Christ we are sacrificing ourselves for the earth. And then you can watch as the earth starts to glow like a rose. And this beautiful rosy color of the sacrifice of humans, as St. Augustine said, or no, not St. Augustine, in the imitation of Christ. As an imagination. Christ has taught us how to die for the earth, die into the earth, how to sacrifice ourselves so that the earth can become a beautiful star, a sun. In Christo morimur. In Christ we are perishing, we are sacrificing for the earth. Second stage. And then as the rosy glow starts to arise through the transparent earth, we start to move on as humans, you can imagine the deepness of space behind you, that behind you is a being who has been there all the time watching this whole drama unfold of the creation from the God and the sacrifice of the Christ for the earth. And that's the Holy Spirit. So you place your attention to the back of you into the deepest parts of the starry realm, and you imagine that you are being observed by a being who has great interest in the future of humans and the healing force of humans. That's the Paraclete, the Holy Spirit, who will revive us all from now until the end of time. And then you come back, wind yourself back around, find your place here in the earth, and come back and feel yourself sitting in your chair and express gratitude for the creation. Takes about 10 minutes. But it's an encapsulating of a great many impulses and themes out of Rudolf Steiner's work in anthroposophy and the work of Christian Rosenkreuz in the necessity for humans to form imaginations of symbols of the reality of these great deeds in the cosmos. So for 10 minutes, you can be a player in a very big drama. And it's something that you could never ever see in a sense experience. But you change the sense world through imaginative cognition. If you do things like that before you go to sleep, I can tell you that your capacity for patience in states of unknowing will become exponential. It becomes huge because you always know that you don't know. But when you need to know, you will know. And usually it's because of the action of somebody else. If you do this work of giving things across the threshold into the evening, into sleeping, and you're working with symbols that seem to mean something to you, other people become the messengers of the spiritual world through the activity of those departed souls who have an interest in us. And they bring back to us images of pictures that we can use to heal other people. They wish to do that because the people who are departed souls have been here and know what it's like to be here and be tempted and to be suffering and to be in pain and to be hurting and to feel anxiety and to feel all these human things. The angels don't quite get that. They wonder why we're interested in it. But humans understand that that part of the drama is necessary for the earth. Because Rudolf Steiner gives a picture that the spirit of the earth is now Christ. And so it's no mystery to me why biodynamics is sort of, and the healing work, especially work with doctors and biodynamics, is the cutting edge of anthroposophy today. I can tell you the energy among the people in the biodynamic movement is only second to the energy of the people in the charter school movement. And you know why? Because they're hungry for the teachings of Rudolf Steiner. And they know that it's a desert. And they know that without the teachings of Rudolf Steiner, it's going to be a really, really tough road to hoe in the future, especially for kids, especially for food, especially for water, things like that we take for granted. And it's time that humans pick up the task of imaginative cognition from Rudolf Steiner and Christian Rosenkreuz. So I hope I was helpful to you in seeing how to do that. Thank you.
difficult after an ending like that to have questions. But, so you could leave if you don't want, but otherwise, would anybody really like to ask a question? We have a few minutes.
I just was wondering if there's some place where that meditation is written down, you know, or this meditation that you just went over, is it written anywhere?
This meditation that you just went over.
No. It's just something I came on. My work is, my research work was for many, many years the motion of the planets. And I would meditate on their movements because that was necessary for me to do my weather predictions. And then somewhere along the line, I was in, there's a part of anthroposophy called the first class. There's a teachings of Rudolf Steiner, he gives mantras. And I was in a first class, and there's a part where the people who are giving the first class recite those mantras in Latin, and suddenly I saw in my mind's eye these exercises that I was working with to understand the movement of the planets. I saw them in the context of the Rosicrucian work. So I bring it, I don't want to write it down. If you work with it, it's very quickening to this Gemüt.
I have a question going back to what you talked about in number 7, where you were suggesting that people draw the symbol. And I'm wondering in your work if you've come to any insights in the fact that we now no longer write.
Yes. Yes.
But we push a key and something happens in an abstract way on a screen.
Right, yeah. A lot of the work I've done recently is the neurology of autism. I just did it to try to orient because I was having experiences in my classes of people having certain qualities that were questions for me. Why certain patterns were happening. And when you track a form of something with your eyes, it stimulates areas in the back of your head where your cerebellum feeds into your visual centers that are actually being registered throughout your whole body. So your ocular motor muscles are triggering body responses. This is the effectiveness of training imaginatively to do things like diving, or the Olympic skiers would. Russia did all these experiments where they would train a whole cohort of athletes to do visualization exercises of diving exercises, and then the others just did the actual diving. The ones that did the visualization got better. So there's something in the way in which your eyes are moving that are triggering what are known as primitive neural cortices. It's in the primitive neural cortices in the midbrain and in the top of the brainstem where the cerebellum comes in. That's where what is known as the reward center is. That's where we make dopamine. And when you move your eyes in drawing or tracking, you are integrating the subtle movements of your fingers in the center of your cerebellum. You are bringing in sensory input from the front coming to the back in the visual centers, and they move through your feelings because there's a shunt there that moves through your hippocampus involving biographical contextual feelings. So as drawing and writing and forming and art, where you have to take subtle body movements and connect them to sensory experiences and add a layer of feelings, is very, very, very neurogenetic. It creates new neurons to change inner experiences. So it wasn't 10 years ago, scientists thought that it was impossible for an adult to create new neurons. And now with the devices that are being created, we can see we're always creating new neurons. It's just that the areas where we create new neurons gets restricted as we get older. But the rule is, if you don't use it, you lose it. So moving your eyes, moving your hands, especially in fine movements, piano playing, knitting, Waldorf teachers, knitting. Yeah, right. Form drawing, painting, sculpting, carving, anything like that requires a feeling to be connected to a movement impulse, a fine movement impulse. This is not running. Running does one thing, but it doesn't do this. And connecting that to various sensory centers creates much younger brains, creates much younger neurons. So visualization, I think we're just on the edge of it. The Rosicrucians have known this for years. This quality, yeah. So screen work where we just punch something limits that, not because of the body movements, but because of the feelings. Feelings.
So then that would also relate to children and free play, because they're
Yes.
constantly imagining.
Yes, exactly. So free play for adults is called art. So the working of some type of artistic impulse every day, even if it's 10 minutes, I say have a small table set up where your kids can't get at it, and you have a piece of paper there with some pastels or some crayons. And when you go by, make a few strokes and then go about your business. Over time, there will be something that will happen there that will be refreshing for you in a whole other way. It's absolutely necessary for adults to have that, because it's the only place where you don't have menu consciousness. So menu consciousness is a simulacrum. It says you're free to choose anything on the menu. And if you don't want what's on the menu, then you don't want that app. Yeah, really, exactly. So the privilege, I could say, the privilege of creating imagery as an adult is the most healing thing. It's a constant consuming of images creates a hunger in the soul for more images, because the birthright is to create images. So if we only consume them, it creates a hunger for them, and that is not wasted on advertisers. So when I have a deep hunger for more and more images that is supplied to me, especially images that move, because that's where my ocular motor and the finer parts of the cerebellum get plugged in. And if we have some cool music and stuff associated with it and the images jar me, then my, quote, feelings get involved. But they get involved the way in which the people that made the menu that lives behind the house, the Jack Belt, created them. My son's an art director at Pixar. They are completely aware of this. And he's a Waldorf kid, and he's struggling to try to bring things into that organization. And there are young artists who get it. And they are trying to turn the ship, but it's not an easy turn, because it takes a big chunk of harbor to turn the Queen Mary. So once that thing is down the road, and it's about selling toys and making money, and it's not about quality. But the young ones in the organization know it's about quality of telling stories. So if you have children, tell them stories. Tell them stories. Have a table where you have some clay and crayons all the time.
Well, friends, I think we're all tired. But thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Hope to see you the weekend
Yeah.
of May 9, 10, and 11.